Hey, welcome to the last of the Chocolate Touch. We're going to finish this book up today. So right now, John is in a very bad situation. The doctor has said that he has a disease and he's calling it chocolatitis. Oh, John is so upset. John's father is so upset. Things are looking pretty bad right now. Let's find out what happens next. Chapter 11. Mrs. Midas was much upset when Mr. Midas told her that John had Dr. Cranium's disease.
He said it was chocolatitis,
Mr. Midas explained, a worried frown on his face.
but he's calling it Cranium's disease because it was his discovery.
No, Dr. Cranium didn't do it, John said. It was magic. It all started after I ate that chocolate. I'm scared, he added. Mrs. Midas sat down and dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. A handkerchief is like a tissue. She was crying. Mr. Midas blew his nose, said he had to attend to something in a different room, and left. John had been so busy feeling sorry for himself that he had not even realized how his mother and father would feel about his chocolate disease. Oh, never mind, Mother, he said, and he put his arms around her shoulders. It'll be all right, really, don't cry. It's nothing, it'll be all right. He could not bear to see his mother's tears. He kissed her wet cheek. His eyes were shut and his lips softly touched hers, so he did not see the change happening right away. He opened his eyes when his lips began to feel sticky. His mother had turned into a lifeless statue of chocolate. John ran wildly out of the house without even thinking where he was going or what he was going to do. All he knew was that somehow he had to get help. For the first time in a long while, he forgot about himself altogether. Now he didn't care about anything, nothing but bringing his mother back to life. Without quite knowing how he even got there, John found himself at the corner where he had bought that chocolate box. The lot was no longer a little dump. The neat little brick building with two show windows was exactly where it had been the first time he'd seen it. But all the candy in the case had been gone. It was no longer there. Instead, in one window, John saw a chocolate trumpet and a chocolate pencil and a silver dollar with a piece bitten out of it. And in the other window, he saw the cafeteria tray littered with chocolate utensils and what was left over of a chocolate lunch. Clearly, this was the right place. Clearly, the owner must know a lot about John's hateful chocolate touch. John rushed into the store. The owner was standing behind a counter, carefully polishing something small and round and flat and silver.
Oh, I was just thinking about you,
he said. John had no time to waste. Remember the coin I found and I gave to you? And you gave me a magic chocolate? He demanded. Without waiting for a reply, he just babbled on. I ate it and it made everything that it touches in my mouth turn to chocolate. And I kissed my mother and now she's chocolate and you've got to change her back.
Easy now, murmured the storekeeper. Calm yourself.
There was an expression of satisfaction in the old man's eyes. This is all your fault, John screamed. If my mother doesn't get better again, well, I'll fight you.
Oh, my goodness, the storekeeper exclaimed. Whose fault do you think this is, anyway?
It's yours, John said. If you hadn't taken that money, well, then I would never have...
Oh, now, John,
the storekeeper interrupted him.
I must insist on honesty. I am glad to hear that you are thinking about your mother for a change. Unselfishness is important, but honesty is also important. If you would just be truthful, perhaps I could help you.
John's eyes and ears turned red. It was becoming unmistakable to him that he only had himself to blame for all this unhappiness. He looked straight into the storekeeper's eyes. I'll do anything. I'll work for you for all my whole life and you can pay me nothing. Just turn my mother back. You could turn me into chocolate instead of her if you want to. You could. The storekeeper apparently was ignoring John's offers.
You were right, John, he said, when you guessed that I had something to do with you getting this chocolate touch. But you yourself earned that coin that bought you the chocolate touch. Only greedy people can see this kind of money. Dr. Cranium was right up to a point. I suppose that one could say you do have chocolatitis, but it was just an outward sign of your selfishness. But my mother, John reminded the storekeeper frantically. My mother has turned to chocolate. Do something about it, please. Oh, please do something about it. I'm glad that you're worried, the storekeeper said unhurriedly. Part of your cure is to be worried about other people. You have been so greedy that you didn't even care whatever happened to other people. Oh, I know, John admitted tearfully. But please decide about me later. Make my mother better now. Well, John, the storekeeper said, if you had to choose between getting rid of your chocolate touch and making your mother better, what would it be? For one moment, John couldn't help imagining his future if all he could eat were chocolate meals. Oh, the thought was terrible. But then he thought of his poor mother and how he had left her, a motionless statue of chocolate. She couldn't speak. Her chocolate hand was still holding her handkerchief. Without further hesitation, John said, "Help my mother, I don't care about me." Well, John, the storekeeper said, I'm going to give you another chance. When next you go to school, your chocolate pencil will be a real wooden pencil and it'll have lead in it. But, John started to protest. What did the pencil matter anyway? The chocolate knife and fork and spoon you left on your tray in the cafeteria will be turned back to metal. Your chocolate trumpet will be shiny gold one again. But, John said, don't you worry about Dr. Cranium's spoon. He'll find a new silver one on the floor. That's not broken. But what about, John said, Susan Buttercup will discover that the chocolate stains on her party dress and her shoes were just water after all. And her silver dollar will be all right. John could not stand the suspense any longer. My mother, he shouted. What about my mother? Will she be all right? The storekeeper smiled. Why don't you just run along now and go find out, he suggested. John turned without even saying goodbye, and he ran straight out of the store. The storekeeper went back to the disc that he had been polishing. It was a disc the size of a quarter. It had to be polished smooth and ready for a new set of initials, just in case he should need to put them on it. Chapter 12. The front door was open, and John rushed into the living room where he had left his mother. She was not there now, but on the chair was a small, wet lace handkerchief. John ran into the dining room and on into the kitchen, and when he came into the kitchen door, he heard silver clanking against a tray. And then he opened the door and saw a wonderful sight, his mother putting coffee things on a tray. He dashed into the kitchen and flung his arms around his mother's waist, sobbing and laughing with relief and joy. There, said Mrs. Midas, stroking the hair from John's forehead. You've had a very disturbing day, dear, but in a few minutes we're all going to have supper and everything's going to be fine again. Oh, my goodness. I do believe I might have some coffee myself. I feel so strange. Oh, it came over me just then in the other room. I really don't know what it was. Then the door from the garden opened and Mr. Midas came in. Before we settle down, Mrs. Midas said to John, why don't you just have a glass of good old milk? You look like you're hot. So, they didn't know what had just happened to her? Well, John thought he certainly was not going to scare them by telling them what had just happened. He watched gratefully as his mother took a frosty blue jug out of the refrigerator and poured from it a glass full of icy creamy milk. Trembling with nervousness, John tilted the glass against his open mouth. The liquid flowed in and down his throat, and it stayed milk! Deliciously milky, tasting of nothing but fresh, clean milk! After the first long, wonderful gulps, he suddenly recalled that he had not thanked the storekeeper for saving his mother. Mother, he said, I gotta go out for a minute. I'll be right back, okay? All right, John, she said, but supper will be ready in 10 minutes. Don't you make us wait.
John ran briskly down the street until he came to the corner where he'd always turned right when he was going to go to Susan's house. Then he turned left instead and started along the 2 blocks of unfamiliar street leading to the candy store. Soon he came to the corner where the red brick building had been. But there was no building and no store, and of course no storekeeper. In the corner lot there was nothing to be seen but a heap of rusty tin cans and broken bottles surrounding a signboard that had new letters that said, "Sold." And that's the end. Oh, I'm glad it had a happy ending and that the mother did not turn to solid chocolate. But I'm still wondering, I wish there was another chapter of this book because I want to know, does John start eating healthy food and liking it? Or do you think maybe he turns back into a candy crazy kid? Sometimes I wish books were longer than they really are. Well, that was a fun book to read, and I'm so glad you joined me for it. This will be the last chapter book I read because it is almost summer break. So thank you for joining me, and I hope that you find some good books to read on your own this summer. Take care. Bye-bye.